I would highly recommend you not ask anyone to evaluate your writing. And this is one of the biggest things that anytime somebody talks about writing in any sort of public context, people will come up to them and say, could you read some of my writing and tell me if I'm any good? I've got a short story here. Could you just take 10 minutes and read it over and let me know what you think of my writing? And every group online devoted to writing, you'll see people regularly saying, here's a scene I wrote. What do people think of it? Does anybody have any feedback about it? And I think it's a really natural instinct. I still want to do this. When I start a book and I've written the first chapter, I just desperately want to show it to my wife and say, like, what do you think of this? Is this worth working on? Is it worth developing? And for me, that's kind of a big part of it. Is I just want a little bit of a quality check. Is this good, or should I just dump it and move on to writing something else? And I think as well, when somebody's writing for the very first time, it's natural to just sort of say, am I any good at this? Right? You're kind of saying to people, do I have some natural skill that you can see here? Is it worth developing, or am I just wasting my time? And the first problem with it is that the person that you ask about this could just be a wildly different type of writer than you are. And so they might, even if you had the potential to be amazing in your writing, they might evaluate it under their own writing and just think that it's not very good. And so I had a writing friend of mine who wrote romance novels, and she looked at one of the first books that I wrote, and she started reading it and gave me some feedback. She offered it, and she gave up in the second chapter. She said, I just can't read this. And she said, I'm really sorry, but I've kind of got as far as I can. And all her feedback was trying to turn it into more what they call purple prose. So very lush, overly descriptive. She wanted to make it sound like a romance novel. And it was a urban fantasy that I was working on, and I had no interest in making it sound like a romance novel. I didn't want to write purple prose. And so she was giving me feedback saying, you shouldn't write the type of book you're writing. You should write the type of book I write, which is fine, but it's just not very useful feedback. The second big problem with this is that no one can really extrapolate from your current writing how well you'll write in the future. So I think when somebody asks for people to give them feedback, they think, well, they'll be able to see if I have the raw talent or not. And I don't think anybody can see if you have the raw talent or not. I think almost anybody who writes is going to get better as they keep writing. And if they keep writing long enough, they'll just keep getting better and better and better and better. And what that'll look like at the end is really anybody's guess. Nobody can read the first thing you write or one of your early writing and see the seeds of greatness, or I don't think they can. And typically, because the person asking for this feedback doesn't know how to evaluate things, they don't even have the ability to evaluate the person giving them feedback. So if you posted this on Reddit and some person said, you're brilliant, you're going to be the next Shakespeare, and then another person said, no, it's garbage, you're never going to write anything worth reading, give up, this is a waste of your time. You don't know anything about those two people. You don't know how they're making their decision. You don't know how competent they are. Are they New York editors? Are they just people who they've always wanted to write a novel and they haven't been able to, and they're kind of they have a chip on their shoulder, or they're a booster for other writers. And so you just don't know how to interpret the feedback in a useful way. And there's just a very, very, very small number of people who have devoted themselves to helping other people become better writers. There's far, far, far more writers, and what their skill is in writing. It's not as a teacher, as a coach, or a mentor. And so some writers will try to do this. They'll assume, because I have experience writing, I'm going to be a good teacher, coach, or mentor, but they may or may not be good at that. Probably most writers will be bad at that. And like the example I gave, all they'll be able to do is tell you how they would have written it, which isn't much good to you. And so unless you really know who the person is, and unless you really know that they have these abilities to help you develop your writing, I just don't see any value whatsoever in ever asking anybody to evaluate your writing. The when your writing will get evaluated will be when you publish it, when you release it. And so when it's finished, when it's as good as you can possibly get, and it's packaged up in like a book. And then when somebody comes back and leaves a review, that's when your writing gets evaluated. But if you have the desire to get it evaluated at an earlier stage than that, that's very hard to do. And I'd say it's probably not a good use of your time.